Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dan Nessel Show. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. We talk a lot about connections in the show, right? About like how important it is to build trust, how connection is just another way to describe relationships, how technology both enables and endangers connections, that sort of thing. Well, today we're going to continue down that path and dig into the art and business of connecting with a true believer in the power of connection. A former IT project manager who founded her own thriving payments business, she knows from experience that building relationships may be one of the most critical success factors for a leader. She's all about integrity, mindset, service, being a giver. And now, as the chief connector for the Charleston chapter of the ever-growing Connective, of course, my listeners will be familiar with that word, she's talking the talk and walking the walk every single day. It's my pleasure to welcome to the show the amazing Karena Bell. Karena,
Thank
how
you,
are you?
Dan.
It's good to see you.
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me today. This is a pleasure.
Well, it's really good to see you. And, we love to talk with people from the Connective in general on the show, because as I was saying to you earlier, that, good networks yield good people. And I can always be sure that whenever I have somebody who's referred to me through that organization, I'm in for a really good conversation and my listeners are in for a good show. But I think that the great thing today is that it's not just somebody from the Connective, it's actually one of the leaders of the organization that I'm speaking to. And, you've been involved now for, half a year or so and just decided to, really take it to the next level with the Connective. And I definitely want to hear about how you got there and how that happened. I want to get into that a little bit. But first, you have a great story, Karena, and coming from a career in project management all the way up through becoming an entrepreneur, female owner of a business, of course. There's a tremendous amount of work and power that you had to kind of go through to get there.
Mhm.
So, if you can share your story, how did you get to become a CEO from your humble beginnings as a project manager?
Sure. When I started into my career, I saw my mom, who was an entrepreneur. She was a multi-business owner, and recognized I definitely want to be a business owner. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want, to do those things. And at the time, I was working and going to school. I wasn't able to go off to school full time. So I actually fell into the IT industry and started my passion and my love for technology and the challenges that came with it. And as I did, I looked to every role that I held as an education. I knew that I would not be able to acquire the knowledge and the experience in a classroom that I could in the real world. And so when I approached my roles, it was with the perspective of an entrepreneur. Even though I was an employee, I looked at everything as if this is my business. And whatever my responsibilities were, these were my responsibilities. This budget is my money. It's coming out of my checking account. So I was very diligent about how the money was spent and where the money was spent, the results that were expected, the results that were delivered. And oftentimes in larger organizations, those numbers can get very soft. And especially when budgets get into the larger numbers in the hundreds of millions, a lot can get lost in those numbers. And that was not the case for me, because to me, throughout my career, I always thought of every job and every responsibility as I was that person that at the end of the day had to answer and had to account for everything. And so I pursued the answers to all of the questions. I thought my leadership would have questions about if I was held accountable for anything that went on in the organization. So I actively sought all of that information, and it was a tremendous experience. A lot of taking risks. Some worked, some didn't, and some failures in that. But I always looked at it as a learning experience. I'm learning what is working. I'm learning what's not working. And from my observations, I realized a lot of people were very siloed in their role, and they wouldn't risk stepping out of their role to try something new, to try something different. And, we all had those circumstances when a leader will say, this is a complex project. This is really difficult. Who wants it?
Mm-hmm.
And everyone would take a step back. Well, I would lean into it. I would take a step forward and go, okay, I can prove my mettle. I can prove what I'm bringing to the table. And on the other side of this, unknown is an opportunity. It's excitement. I'm going to come out of this with more tools in my tool belt to handle the next biggest project and the next and the next. So then that actually developed a bit of a reputation for things that were difficult, things that might not have been as savory, but they were complex. And those were areas I found interesting. I recognized very early on, I'm a natural problem solver. If there's a problem, I'll run after it. I'll attack it because I'm getting something out of it. I'm learning something. I'm gaining more skills. I'm gaining more knowledge because I knew this was going to help me build the foundation for running my own successful business or businesses in the future.
Okay, there's so much here that I kind of want to dig into a little bit because in that short intro, you have uncovered quite a few themes, I think, that we're going to continue to explore during this conversation. But it's a rare person that kind of goes through their career thinking of themselves as an entrepreneur, right? Like we work for companies, and many of us, certainly if you're Gen X or older, especially, you're taught from a young age, or you're encouraged from a young age to go work for a great company, be safe, do the right thing, you get benefits, you'll get a great retirement. Now we all know that that's all kind of a fairy tale now, and we all know that, especially Gen Xers have seen that change. And that's one of the reasons why we are the way we are. That rug was pulled out from, in many cases, our parents, but also from us. And we took on this entrepreneurial kind of renaissance, I think, and started to look really deeply into the way that we develop ourselves and look for challenges. But still, I think it's a small percentage of people who saw the writing on the wall and was like, you know what, I need to be a learner, not an absorber. Like, I don't need to be passive. I need to be active. I need to learn. I need to improve. I need to stretch. And through taking on difficult challenges, that's how I'm going to stretch myself. And that's how I'm going to be able to take on the next challenge. It's the old thing about, okay, if you can't get out of your comfort zone unless you're stretched. And then when you stretch and you learn something new, well, then your comfort zone becomes much broader and much wider, or relocates. But then guess what? You have to stretch again, and you have to do it again, all over again, to learn and grow. So I didn't mean to go on a diatribe there, but the point is, right, that there is a real connection there between, success, people who are successful, and seeing things through the lens that I'm going to love a challenge, right? I am going to forget about this safety and sitting down and waiting for my job to take me where I want to be. I have to take it to where I want it to go. I have to drive the bus.
Mm-hmm.
So, that there is a great example of mindset, right? I mean, I don't know if you've ever read the Mindset book by Carol Dweck. It's about that learner mentality, understanding that, hey, I'm going to take these challenges on and learn. That's the approach. The way that I have to look at things is different than the way other people look at things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, to me, that sounds like that's kind of the way that you started to go. And from earlier on in your career, it seems to have served you well. So, have you given a lot of thought to your mindset during those times? Did you actively make that happen, or was it just something that was?
I actively sought that, and I am an observer as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I take in a lot more than people realize. And as I was working my way up, I was also watching other leaders and looking for leaders that aligned with me and my style, or in what was successful for them and what was comfortable for me, that I could adopt and grow into. And I was also very realistic about what I did and did not possess at at that certain time to be what I thought was a good leader or a great leader. And that was a wonderful experience because you see exactly what you don't want, which can be just as important as identifying what you do want. And I was fortunate. The first two mentors I had in my career came to me. They saw potential in me, they saw capability in me, and approached me to help elevate me at an accelerated rate. And I've always attempted to have mentors throughout my career. And I think they're very, very important because they will accelerate wherever it is you want to go. Now, you should, and you hit on this earlier, you should always have your hands on the wheel of your life and your decisions, whether it's personal or professional. And a good mentor is somebody who is going to recognize in you what you just haven't had the chance to recognize yet. And they ask you those questions or put you in those situations where you're self-discovering, where they're not doing anything for you. They're helping you get to that point yourself through the self-realization of what you are capable or what you could be capable of. And for years, we've all heard it. You can do anything. You can be anyone you want. And I heard that, but I also had self-limiting beliefs and was always striving and excelling, but thought, there's this lid. There's this lid that, I'll try and break through it when I get there. And all these other less than positive thoughts, but I never stopped working hard in that. But I always thought, there's getting, the bottom's going to fall out. And it was just a couple years ago that another mentor helped me recognize and realize that I have no lid. And once that happened, all bets were off. My passion and my purpose were unlimited.
Again, you've touched on some amazing things that each one of these kind of topics can go its own way, and we can do a whole hour or two just talking about passion or limiting beliefs. But what I want to point out to listeners, of course, but to anybody out there is we're hearing themes that successful people share, right? Which is they had help, they had a mentor, finding the right mentors or mentors. Don't know how you want to pronounce it out there, but that's the way it is. And so it's not like you feel like you have to do it on your own. You may feel like you have to do it on your own, but there are people out there who you can and should look out to,
Mm-hmm.
and finding those good examples and emulating those good examples is a sure way to find those people. You mentioned that there were certainly some negative experiences. You were, as an observer, you saw the good and the bad, and I wanted to know if any of those bad things were what propelled you in different directions, or did you ever come across something in your career that was a major obstacle that got you to the next level?
Yes, I worked about 10 years in automotive manufacturing corporate headquarters. One was for North American Volkswagen of North America, and the other one was Chrysler of North America. And obviously, IT at the time was a male-dominated industry. I think it
still is, probably.
Still
right?
is very much. But you didn't see a lot of women in that industry. And then automotive manufacturing as well. And there was a mindset, good, bad, or indifferent. It was a realistic mindset that as a woman, there's no way you could know as much as the men sitting at the table.
Yep.
And fortunately for me, one of my most instrumental mentors, asked if he could help mentor me and helped me realize that to be successful in that environment, I had to come to the table with the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of who else at the table had those answers, I had to work just as hard, if not harder, to prove my credibility and why I should be at that table. And in that exercise, what eventually happened was, as we were sitting around tables and we're asking questions and people are answering or not answering, there came a point when the questions were being asked, I was the only one answering them. And then that also revealed to the leadership team that there were people that were not pulling their weight sitting at the table as well. And then that caused a validation of why certain people were sitting at the table. If they're not bringing value, if all the answers are coming from one area, why do we have these other areas involved? And so that by default lifted the other participants in the expectation and what they should be bringing, where there was a bit of complacency.
Yeah.
And that mentor also helped me realize, he says, I don't want you thinking out of the box. Everybody's thinking in the box. He says, I don't want you thinking out of the box. I want you living outside the box. I want you to develop a mindset that has no limits, and you get used to asking for forgiveness versus permission. And he didn't say that in a disrespectful way to leadership, not at all. That was not the intent. The reason he was saying that is he wanted to convey to me that I need to be so innovative that the normal answers and the standard answers are boring. I don't look to that. I look to the best answers. Because oftentimes people race to get an answer, and it's a very quick answer, but it may be a short-term answer, versus taking the time to think about innovation and what is the right answer for that given situation. And that was an exercise, again, that created a characteristic and a mindset that I absolutely love and enjoy, because it's a space that I live in. That if it's average, if it's mediocre, it's very boring to me.
It sounds like, first of all, this is a great story, and I think you're describing, unfortunately, some of the situations that many women had gone through and still go through, being pioneers in their field, or being different than the stereotype. In automotive, just a great example, very, very male dominated industry. I mean, look, I worked in Japan for many, many years. Japan has a ways to go still. And so does the US. US is making, many American companies at least, are making serious progress. Japan is making progress, but much, much slower. So you do see these, many women relegated to roles because their male counterparts just have a cognitive dissonance around the fact that, well, how can she possibly understand this? She's not, she's a woman. And it's surprising that still exists in this world today. It's not surprising. It's a shame that still exists in this world today. You were, that was a part of your career, like earlier on in your career. And it just, I don't know whether to say that you were lucky or fortunate to encounter a mentor who became an ally and was able to kind of give you that guidance to really earn your place at the table by owning the table almost, right? Like being better than the colleagues around you, male, female, doesn't matter, just being better than them in the areas that you had to be better than them, and thinking differently was your ticket to achieving recognition, right? And you had to work harder than everybody else, and and I'm sure that is still the case for maybe in your current business, and even for many women today. But the thing there, though, is that you got the mentor, right? You found that person who was out of curiosity, was it a male, female?
An Asian male.
Asian male. Fantastic. So there are good guys out there.
Absolutely. Oh, there are. In fact, ironically enough, I've always had male mentors throughout my career until the last year or two, and have appreciated it. And you touched on it earlier. He was definitely a blessing, definitely, because, and that was part of our conversation. He says, "Let me help you understand how men think." And men and women definitely think differently. We do. That's just biological. We do. And he said, let me help interpret that in how you can be successful in this environment. And it wasn't an us and them. It's like, this is the culture. This is the mindset. And these are the ingredients to be successful. And something that I recognized very early on in my career as a woman in male dominated industries is not to bring emotion to the office. There are labels that are associated and attached to that. And I learned very early on that the best way for my voice to be heard is to speak from facts and data and logic. And this is something that I coach other business owners on as well, that, there's two areas that people should really be mindful of. There's a response and there's a reaction. A reaction is anchored in emotion. A response is anchored in logic. And when I'm put into a situation that invokes emotion in me, I pause the situation or I step away from the situation before I respond to it. And this is something I've developed over the years, that it's rare that I get an emotional response, because when I'm in the office, it's very logical. Everything is very data driven, because people lie, data doesn't.
Absolutely. Data in the hands of a liar is a dangerous thing, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get that a lot. You get unfortunately people out there who can manipulate data because so many people don't understand what they're looking at. It's important for everybody to get educated about this. But there's something you said there that was really, really fascinating. The response versus reaction bit, especially, if you look at that's such a generally good way to think about things, I think, because you've just described really the problem with Twitter, for example, right? Twitter is 100% reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Like no thinking, just slam into your keyboard and put something out there that's going to try to win in the moment, try to overpower somebody else, and or defend, right? Defend yourself, which is always a rough position to be in. Whereas the cool thinker, the pause, the strategic kind of break where you consider the variables and, hey, come back with what you have to say. That doesn't necessarily work on Twitter, but it just in general, it makes not only good business sense, it makes good relationship sense to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We used to pause more. We used to have a lot more time between thoughts, but in this instant gratification world we live in, it's ever more important, I think, to think about things the way you just described. And, I appreciate that approach. And I think maybe we'll go into it a little bit more. The other thing I want to say was just more of a personal thing. You said that you had male mentors your whole life all along. And I was the opposite. I had basically female mentors my entire career. Maybe that's because I'm in communications and marketing and so on. But I don't think so. I just happened to be in these roles where my bosses were women. I and I am sure that I could comb my 25 years of professional life and find something I said that was maybe insensitive or whatever. Everybody could, but I think that I've always had difficulty understanding why women are seen differently in the workplace, because I've probably always reported to women. So maybe I've been sort of inculcated the proper way. I don't know. I feel like your boss is your boss, and your colleagues are, the knowledge is the knowledge. It doesn't matter where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So and being in communications, it's a very, very female field. So I think that if there was a problem understanding that, where if there was a equality problem in my mind with women, I would be in serious, serious trouble. There's no way that I would last, or I would want to be here. So, but it's interesting just the way things shake out, because some of my greatest mentors have been women. And, I hope to have some of them on the show at some point for sure. But anyway, getting back to what you're saying, I kind of want to dig a little bit into this, bringing emotion thing in, because we're pressured these days, I think, or maybe that's the wrong way to think about it. We are a society that's come a long way in terms of coaching, in terms of psychology, organizational behavior, things like this. And we're often told, or maybe asked, to bring your authentic self
Mm-hmm.
to whatever whatever position you're in. Like, be present, be yourself. And part of that is that emotional kind of connection. So if you are overly focused on logic and data, you run the risk of not being able to build relationships because you don't necessarily build relationships on logic and data. So you need to find that balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially as you have started your own company several years ago, I'm going to just go out on a limb and say it wasn't because you understood data that you secured your customers. I mean, it may have also been because you understand data, but how how would you see the balance that we need to have between that kind of emotion and logic now, like as it plays out, people need to be authentic, right? So
Mm-hmm.
how have you seen that play out in your own life and in your professional life?
That's a great question. And I swung too far to the logical
Mhm.
side. And especially I was in my 20s. And because that was the environment I was in, and that was what I needed to do to be successful. But then I also realized that there was that aspect of relationship building that I missed. And in that environment, that was not as conducive. And then I'm originally from Michigan. So there's a cultural difference of South Carolina, where I am now. And it's
Mhm.
very, mash the gas, steam forward, never give up, never say die, win, 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 which is a fantastic mantra and attitude as long as it is healthy for people,
Mhm.
and that we're not leaving dead bodies in the wake of success and accomplishment and things like that. Because in my heart, I always knew, when leaders would say it's lonely at the top, and I would look and I'd say, why? Why aren't you bringing people with you that you trust? The reason it's lonely at the top is because you don't have people you trust around you. And why aren't you bringing those people forward that may have the capability, but they might not have the pedigree behind them? Or, we see leadership teams that all look alike,
Yeah.
and they walk alike, and they sound alike. As a business owner, and at the time, as a future business owner, my thought was, I want the best talent I can get. I do not care what package it comes in.
Mhm.
That is my competitive advantage. I want the very best talent. And I certainly don't want talent that thinks and walks and talks like me. I know how that story ends.
Yeah.
I've heard it. It's boring. I want people that are going to challenge me, and we're going to learn from each other, and we're going to collaborate, and we're going to do phenomenal things together. And I had the privilege of working with some incredible professionals in my corporate career. And we accomplished things that people said we shouldn't be able to do, or we don't understand how you did that. And I credit my mentor back to live outside the box, set the expectations with your teams. And that's what we did, is we set the expectation. Guys, there's no rules. How can we get this done? What is the best way we can get this done? No rules. And then you start whittling it down. You start analyzing it. So much innovation came out of brainstorming sessions like that, designing, developing, rapid development, things like that, where we could change very quickly. And that applies in life as well.
Yeah.
That, we're all developers. Whether we want to admit it or not, we are developing ourselves. We're either going the right way and we're growing and you're achieving, or maybe your code is a little buggy and you're stuck and you can't get past that error code. So yeah, I'm sorry, I lost my
Oh, whatever train of thought you're on was really going very, very well. It's been a great train. I've been enjoying the ride so far, but that's fine. We were talking really about the balance between logic and emotion and getting there. And you said you swung hard to the logic side for a while because that was, you need to do that for your career. So, I imagine that you're heading towards finding that balance, right? And
Yes.
when you talk about innovation and you talk about hiring, especially in the area of talent, as your example, you're talking about hiring people from different, like, doesn't matter what what package they're in,
Mm-mm.
right? You're just hiring people because they're the right person. They have the talent, right? I
Mhm.
mean, and what it almost sounded a little bit like you were describing the Apollo 11 program. The famous it was the Tom Hanks movie, I think,
Yeah.
but the famous mission that almost went terrible. Well, it did go terribly wrong, but
Mhm.
they were able to bring these guys back to Earth with essentially cardboard, duct tape, and a lot of ingenuity, and a whole ton of the best engineers at NASA just sitting around rooms with no rules and hard deadlines.
Mhm.
Right? There's no
Mhm.
rules. Do what you want, but it has to be done in 15 minutes, or people will die. So,
Mhm.
so clearly, you weren't in a situation where you have to make that choice now, or people will die. But the idea of collecting the best talent and setting them free, right, and being adaptive in the way that you kind of bring their ideas to fruition, I think is a formula for success. And over and over and over again, we see in different organizations where in innovative organizations
Mhm.
and for innovative people. But I think I think that whole being able to lead a team like that, being able to do that, kind of implies that you have to have some sort of emotional intelligence, right?
Yes.
So swinging from that logic side to the emotional side, you know, like I think it's important to recognize that none of this stuff could happen if you're 100%, imbalanced in one way or another.
I agree. I think people constrain themselves by looking at what they want to achieve as a destination. I've arrived. I've
Hmm.
arrived. I once I do this, I've arrived. And with me, that's very final from my perspective. Instead, and I know this is going to sound really cliche, it is the journey that gets me excited, because what motivates me, and I'll ask you, Dan, and this is probably an unfair question. What is your
Hmm.
potential? Do you know the answer to that question?
I, so I was a little silent for two reasons. First, I was writing down some of the great things you're saying. Second of all, I really don't know how to answer the question. I think potential. Like, I'm of the abundance mindset. I like to claim that I am, and this is not to say that I have my moments and times where I feel like I'm really like penned in, and you know, I'm making this, everything's going to go wrong, and I have negative thoughts and negative things to deal with. So I'm working my
Hmm.
way through all this stuff just like everybody else is. But when I have a chance to breathe and step back, I look and I think, oh, well, the potential is really infinite. I mean, my own potential is only limited by my limiting beliefs, which you referred to earlier,
Hmm.
right? And those limiting beliefs are kind of part of your factory wiring in some ways, you know.
Hmm.
And I've spoken to some great people on my show and off the show, but a couple of folks in neuroscience. Michael Netzley comes to mind, and I'm gonna be chatting with a wonderful lady named Laura McHale soon, who remind me that you have a default network in your head basically, and that's how you've been wired. People say, and
Hmm.
wiring is the wrong word, but that's sort of, you have that in your head, and that's what tells you where you think your potential is, like where your limits are. But you, as every human, has the power and should be overriding this. And because you have neuroplasticity, you're able to, kind of adjust and rethink the way, create new pathways. It doesn't eliminate that fundamental default network. That's why it's called default, because
Hmm.
you can lose those new pathways and revert to where you used to be. You can always fall back. But, with putting the work in, and a lot of that is just experience and mindfulness, and just making sure that you focus on where you're going and what you're doing, and keep taking those lessons and learning. That's the whole mindset thing. If you're, um, with that learning mindset, you will be able to change the way you think about your potential. But with the fixed mindset, then you think that your potential is fixed by nature, right? So that's, if we pull it all the way back to that. But to
Hmm.
try to answer the question, I think that you know my potential is undefined. And if anybody would look at my desk right now, you'd see so much crap, but also various stickies with ideas and with kind of thoughts, that may or may not go somewhere. But I think it's important. I think this goes to something that you just said earlier too, and Believe me, I did not intend to talk this much on my own show. But anyway, this goes to something you said. You were talking about we're all developers. And I really like that for a lot of reasons, but I've never heard it said that way before. And I've talked to a lot of people and I've been around on this earth for a while. Nobody's said we're all developers. People have said we're all creators.
Mhm.
I say we're all creators sometimes. But to say that we're all developers is a little different nuance, right? And I think it's very important to recognize that both of those things can be true at once. Because I think you're right. We're all learning, we're all developing. That development is also learning and improving yourself or rectifying problems that you have, whatever it is, that buggy code you mentioned.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I think that if we're all developers and we have that right kind of mindset, then the potential is like, it's really your choice.
Absolutely.
Does that answer the question?
It does. It does. You've
Okay.
given me the most detailed response I've ever gotten when I asked that question, and most people don't have an answer. They say,
Yeah.
"Well, I think it's this," or "I don't know," and that's just it. That's what fuels me, is that I will never meet my potential because I don't know what my potential is. So there's a sense of urgency for the time that I have left on this earth in me to fulfill as much of my potential as possible. And I don't know what that is. I don't know where it is. So there is always, every day I operate with a sense of urgency. Every day I wake up excited, energized. My mind is going 100 miles a minute. Like you, I have sticky notes. I have lists. I have lists upon lists upon lists of ideas and things like that. But it's also from that mindset of abundance.
Yeah.
I am free to think about all of the great ideas, or let me say, all of the ideas. We'll figure out if they're great later or not. But there, again, it's that limiting factor that once you jettison that out of your mindset, and you truly believe in your heart that you have opportunity wherever you want to look,
Mm-hmm.
your passion and your purpose will be unstoppable. It will be absolutely unstoppable because you have so many options you never knew you had before.
Yeah.
And I admit, I suffer from FOMO, fear of missing
Oh,
out.
all the time.
What if I don't talk to somebody and encourage them to their greatest capabilities, to their greatest capacities? I think one of my superpowers is I recognize potential in other people. And I work to pull that out because the world needs it. We all have tremendous gifts and tremendous value. And so many people are locking it inside and not letting it out for the world to see, experience, and possibly evolve as a society from it. And okay.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna. I'm just kind of nodding and thinking. Absolutely to whatever to every word that's coming out of your mouth. I mean, I first of all, I like the way that you basically did a podcast takeover there, and it became the Karena Bell show for just a few minutes.
Oh, sorry.
And you no, I love that. I love it when my guests turn the tables on me and ask me questions. First of all, it takes the pressure off of me to do that. But second of all, it gets me really thinking about what you were saying, and I want to be considered and thoughtful in the way that I respond. Right, partly because this is going out there for people to hear, but also because I you said your superpower is recognizing potential in others. My superpower, I like to think right now, is basically curiosity and trying to dig that and trying to find out what's really cool about other people. But what I was going to say is when you turn the question at me, I got that sense clearly, and listeners can't see, but the way that you're attentive and looking and thinking about things as I was responding, I can tell you've got the hamster wheels running as you're because I have that as well. So like you've got the kind of the thoughts are buzzing, and that it doesn't surprise me that you wake up feeling positive and having an energy every day, right? And I think that's probably why. And here's where we're going to kind of move into what I kind of laid out as one of the main topics of our chat today. this could be why you are so obsessed with connections, right? And when I
Mhm.
say obsessed, I use that in a very positive way,
Mhm.
right? I mean, like almost like as a purpose obsession, right? Not an OCD obsession, but a real kind of focus and like what will make this connection work, and why should I connect with this person, and what is a good connection? All these the great things. So everything that you've been saying to this point, mindset, getting over those limiting beliefs, having great mentors, working for with a sense of urgency, and recognizing potential, among some of the other things you're saying. I think that all comes to bear in how you approach networking. And like networking is the old way to say it, isn't it?
Mhm.
But connecting, right? I feel
Mhm.
like we should probably
Yeah.
eliminate that word. And it's hard.
Let's do
Apologize
it.
because I think trying to get rid of that word too. But maybe that's a good place to start. You're you're making a real go at connecting as a science, as a business, but backed by real relationships, for to do real good for the people who you're connecting to, right?
Mhm.
What's the difference between like just networking and that kind of connecting? And what are your thoughts about, what makes a good connection?
Mm, that's a great question. But my thoughts on networking and connecting, and you're right. I think networking has become a dirty word
Yeah.
where it's a lot of it is just very superficial. We're passing business cards back and forth. We're shaking hands. We're projecting a plastic smile. We really don't want to be there. We're thinking about other things. My boss told me to come to these networking events, or I feel like I have to be there. And they're really not aligned. They're not aligned with you as an individual, and maybe they're not aligned with you as a business, whether you're an employee or a business owner. And I think they're just things that have occurred over the past that may have once been effective, but they evolved into something that wasn't. It was more of like speed dating.
Yeah.
And how well can you get to know somebody before you move on to the next? And the connection aspect to me is important to me. I've always been, even though I said on the outward, I was a very logical person early in my career, but inwardly, I am very emotional. And I didn't have the opportunity to let that out until I put myself into a different circumstance and a different culture. And moving to the South, that helped me do that because, and I'll just share this briefly and then get back to your question, is when I came and I moved to South Carolina and people would ask me, how are you? They would really want to know, how are you? How's the
Imagine
family?
that.
And I even remember talking to family back up in Michigan going, oh my goodness, you can't get away with, I'm good. They will ask additional questions and they really want to know you as a person. And I loved that. It resonated with me. In fact, even when it first started happening in the culture down here at the time, people would hug each other in the office
Hmm.
and I would stiffen up. And people would say, what's wrong? I said, where I come from would be going to HR right now. Uh, because it was a hand on the forearm or a hand on the shoulder, things like that. And they're like, "Oh, sweetheart, you're fine here. That's just what we do. That's culture." Well, that has obviously since changed, but it was so good for me. It was validation that, here's an environment where I can be a real person. I can care about other people, and that so it provided a petri dish for me to experiment with emotions and empathy and compassion outwardly versus inwardly. And so getting back to the connection aspect of it is I don't think someone can truly connect with another person until they get to know them as a person. And we're all like onions. We all have different layers that we allow people to see. And early on, I was very protective, very
Yeah.
private, and everyone would see the first layer. And I was very protective of who would see the second and the third. But then I realized that with that vulnerability comes the connection and the relationship. And from that, also had the self awareness that, like, hey, short of death, there isn't anything I can't overcome. So one of my running jokes is I never take anything personally. So if
Mhm.
you're going to insult me, let me know beforehand so I know how to properly receive the message. Because oftentimes, a lot of emotion is coming from someone else's thought and
Mhm.
not really from what you did or who you are. That it really is coming from the
Yeah.
source
Well, you
instead
talk
of.
about primarily that negative emotion, right? That
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and making a connection takes time.
Yeah.
And we live in a disposable society. We live in an instant gratification society. And if you are truly committed to making connections, you have to invest time in that. And you have to put yourself out there as well. I will always put other people first, and I will use myself as an example first to make other people feel more comfortable. And it is when I'm talking with someone, I'm truly interested in people. I find people fascinating. Everybody has a story, an adventure, an experience, an education, a culture. And another one is nobody's safe from me. I will talk to everyone. There
Mhm.
is nothing, there is no one that I cannot find something interesting about to ask a simple question. And then starts a conversation. And you just
Yeah.
walk it down the road. And the
That's my
answers,
show. That's the show right there. There's no one
yeah,
that's not interesting enough to not ask a simple question. I should probably
ask a
write that down.
question. And that's one thing that, if you ask interesting questions, you will get amazing answers. And again, it comes back to networking and connecting. In networking, everybody was asking the same questions. When you're connecting with somebody, you're asking them questions that could actually be thought provoking. And something that I found early on is when you are interested more in someone else than yourself, you become interesting.
That might be one of the best things to think about, right? Because being interested in somebody else also is one of those things that you just can't fake, right? Well, let me say, you can try and you might get 15 minutes in, you might get that one or two questions in, but pretty soon you're going to be exposed as, oh, this person's not really interested in me.
Hmm.
You know, there's a lot of reciprocity involved in connection and in relationships, and it's going to be pretty clear very fast if you're not interested, not genuinely interested. Then you're going to come off as a networker, right? So
Hmm.
like, which which is interesting, and I agree with your definitions about of networking. But that's how we started, right? That's how it all kind
Right.
of began, and whatever 20 years ago, I was in Japan at the time, getting business cards printed, going to the Chamber of Commerce event, and you speed dating. You're passing out cards, you're talking to people like, oh, I make a connection, I have these connections, oh great, I have all these people in my database now, I have all these people in my book, whatever it is. And it is what it is, but it's very, very superficial. All these tools came out in the last 20 years to kind of like to enable that process, to theoretically, you know, better that process, improve that process. But it also accelerated that superficiality of it to some degrees. It kind of amplified the superficiality. So like LinkedIn, we talk about LinkedIn on the show a lot. From what we're talking about now, making those deep connections, it is a connection is something that cannot be achieved by clicking a button on LinkedIn and
Hmm.
adding somebody to your numbers. But yet it's called a connection.
Hmm.
So people think, oh, I have these connections. I have all these connections. So we need to figure out some way to clear up the confusion, I think, and the definitions a little bit for common consumption. That, hey, look, you've got a lot of people in your LinkedIn. Let's call that a network, because that's a network, right?
Hmm.
But really, how many of them are real connections?
Hmm.
You know, so people play free and easy with the word connections, a lot. But even there, right? Taking what you've just said, expressing interest and really meaning it, being interested, can be achieved on these digital platforms as well, right? It just takes time, it takes effort, and it can totally be done. But if, of the thousands of people that I'm connected to on LinkedIn, I don't know how many of them are real connections, you know?
Hmm.
I spoke to this wonderful woman recently called Brooke Ellis. She's a friend of mine, but she's also just written a book. I'm not sure if it's out yet. It might be out by the time this is published, called Conversations That Connect. And I'll introduce you to Brooke, Karina, because you have to meet her. Anyway,
I'd love to.
Brooke runs a social media agency that's focused on social media customer service. So she's probably the leading expert in that particular use of social media. And she exactly will tell you this, what you're saying. Like, she'll say the same thing. Those connections come out of conversations and meaningful conversations. And that's how you pick out if you're interested in someone, or you have something, if you think somebody really has something interesting to say, it's got to be a conversation. It has to develop in that direction. And you know who else said that? Somebody else you introduced to me, who was on the show a very short while ago, Mike Verrett, right?
Mhm.
And Mike is like all about that.
Yeah.
You can't have an elevator pitch anymore. You have to have a elevator pitch that's going to go 8 floors up until really building a connection, a meaningful connection built on trust. So, sorry for going off. This is a great topic. I love talking about this stuff. But I kind of where I was going was you're looking at these meaningful connections and understanding that, there's one thing to build a network, and it's another thing to really take the time and put in the effort to create meaningful relationships with people.
Mhm.
Now you're sort of, going all in 2 different directions, right? You have your own company, Turtle Bay
Mhm.
Payment Systems. Is that correct? Turtle Bay Payment Systems.
Solutions.
And
Close.
close. Sorry, it'll be right in the episode title, by the way. And the other side is the Connective.
Mhm.
Now, we haven't talked too much about the Connective, other than I keep talking about it and saying we meet there, and there's, it's a group, and it is an excellent group of people, and it's been growing. But, why did you decide, like, so you already have a thriving business in Turtle Bay Payment Solutions, pardon me,
Mhm.
built on your ability to make those connections that matter.
Mhm.
How did you decide to open up a chapter for the Connective? And, like, how are you kind of putting these thoughts and these philosophies into play for the Connective? Because the Connective, I'll just say this out there for anybody listening. It's not like BNI or any of those organizations where anybody could just raise their hand and join, right?
Right.
So how are you influencing the way that the Connective is growing based on the fact that that connections take time?
I think because I was always seeking a community that aligned with me and how I wanted
Yeah.
to operate. And the traditional networking just wasn't there. And once I attended a couple of the Connective meetings, I recognized immediately this is my tribe. This is a
Mm.
culture that has a high expectation. They only bring in high caliber, high character professionals that are intentional about connecting, building relationships, and pushing business back and forth within the community. And that's how I like to operate. Most people will say the most business is done based on the relationships that you've developed, whether it's a cold relationship that eventually turns warm for a client, or it's just something that from a referral, somebody you might have gone to college with, and they're calling you up saying, "Hey, Dan, I have somebody you need to meet." And the reason that referrals happen is because of that trust factor. And how can you trust somebody until you get to know them? Again, it comes back to, I can tell you all day long what I am and what I stand for, but I'd rather show you, and then you determine whether we're aligned or not from that point forward. It's kind of that trust and verify.
Yeah.
And coming back to the mindset of abundance, I would make connections, build relationships, and make referrals anyway. That was just something I naturally did. And with the mindset of abundance, I had tremendous help along the way. I continue to have tremendous help in mentors and people that are helping guide me in my journey. And I feel I have so much to share and so much to give, because the people that have helped me have accelerated my growth and my own evolution. And I feel that it's my duty, my obligation, my responsibility to do the same for others that
Yeah.
people have done for me. And I have this mindset of those that can, should, and they must. And the real question is, if you can, why aren't you, to me? And again, if I'm making those relationships and I'm making referrals and I'm helping someone else build their business, it's a win-win. There's enough for everybody. Go out there and get it. And you know what? If you can help other people go get it, you know, I have been very blessed throughout my career. And so one of my favorite quotes, I love quotes and quips. So,
Mhm.
forgive me. I use them a lot because they inspire me and they're very short and they're very effective for me. Is the blessings in my life are meant to benefit others. So the more that I am successful, the more I feel I'm obligated to help other people become successful, because from success, that means we're helping more and more people. Once our families are taken care of, most people will expand their blessings outside of themselves and start looking at others and looking at their community and looking at their church or whatever those things that are important to them are. So to me, and success is a funny definition, because I was thinking about this the other day, that, you know, most people think success and they think commas and dollar signs.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's accurate. Success to me is, am I healthy, or am I successful in my health? Am I successful as a spouse? I want to be a remarkable spouse. Am I successful? I want to be a good person. Am I successful? Well, and that's each person's individual definition. It's not for society to say, or social media and things like that. If you really want to get honest with what success means to you need to define that, not someone else. And there's many levels of success. I've met people with small bank accounts that are tremendously successful people. I've met people with large bank accounts that wish for success that other people with less enjoy. So, it's that abundance, and that's building others. To me, it's benefit. What are we
Yeah.
creating? We're creating benefit. And I align with those that align with me, in that you spend time with people that they're more givers than takers. And there's two types of people. There's givers and receivers, and there's takers. And clearly I don't resonate with takers, and have been able to identify over the years, have been able to identify people that have those characteristics. I align with the givers and the receivers. And most of those people that I run into are all much more givers than receivers.
I had a great week from that perspective, partly because of you, partly because of some other folks in the connective and out of the connective, just people. The longer you're doing this, the longer you're giving and just sort of connecting and making essentially answering people's questions with the information you have, because you have it. And what am I going to do with it? Right? Just it seems natural to me to want to help somebody if I know I have an answer, or I know somebody who can help them.
Mm-hmm.
It's that it's a service mentality in some ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
The blessings in life are meant to benefit others. That's probably the great way to summarize what it means to think about serving. Doesn't mean that I'm going to do somebody's bidding. It just means that I see a need. If I'm in a position to help that need, I should help that need.
Mm-hmm.
So this week was just, it starts to kind of roll and grow. And I have you on the show. I've had other, like Chris. Chris has emailed me and asked me to connect with, so and so and so and so, because they heard there was somebody in Connective who does podcasts, and then, but it's fantastic. I already know these people are already vetted, and I've seen some of them in meetings, and it's going to be great. I got a connection notice to meet with Carrie Nicholson, who we talked about, and
She's
'cause
amazing.
we were just talking about her the other week, and all of a sudden,
Yes.
like, here she is again. So, there's some great people out there. So I feel like, that spirit of kind of giving, it does come back to you when you're not looking for it, especially. And, other things happen that are just the result of cultivating relationships and just, helping people when it's right to help them. And I feel like I've I've recently sort of had a couple of aha moments about how that translates into my into my day job leading a communications team for a major company, you know, making connections that matter is building relationships, and it takes time, right?
Mhm.
Now I've been with my company for a certain amount of time, and being in communications, I have access and exposure across the organization probably more than most people do. Somebody on a sales team isn't necessarily going to be seeing 80% of the people that I see. Like if they have to go talk to legal, it's probably a problem. Whereas I've talked to legal all the time. You know, I talk to HR all the time. I talk to sales all the time. And I talk to leaders across the entire organization. And it made me think, okay, well, here's my little nucleus of connections that matter. It's not a company network. It's a group of connections because these are relationships that are built on trust. And because of that trust, I can achieve things
Mhm.
that, maybe others can't or aren't equipped to. And that's a huge value that I bring and that my team brings. My team is a bunch of connectors. They're all fantastic. So, point is that this whole idea of connection is not just for people who are out there trying to join the Connective or being part of LinkedIn. It's actually something that I think goes across your life in different ways. And it's something that you have to, it's if you're authentically real and genuine with folks and you're a giver. And that's what it comes down to, right? Being a giver, not a taker, having that feeling of abundance, as you said, or the mindset of abundance. How can things go wrong, right?
Mhm.
It's it's a formula for success in my mind, and it seems like it's been a formula success for you too, Karina.
It has, and I believe collaboration is the new currency. And when you bring together, and I learned that early on in my career, working with phenomenal people, and you're open to hear things, you're open to do things you've never done before, will provide you opportunities you never dreamed of, whether you take advantage of them or not. You're
Mhm.
having conversations you may never have had before with a limited mindset. Uh,
Yeah,
in the accomplishments is just amazing. And it gets so exciting that sometimes I have problems sleeping because, and it may not be something in particular, it's just there is so much opportunity out there. And again, opportunity doesn't mean money. It could be
yeah,
experience. It could be meeting somebody or doing something or being part of something that is the first for the world. You just don't know.
yeah.
And I'm a firm believer in we're all one person away from changing our lives. And
Absolutely.
that's another reason why no one's safer on me. I'll talk to everyone because when I'm talking with someone, I'm not thinking about what can they do for me. I'm thinking, who do I know they need to know because I'm going to help them first. I'm going to help them first and foremost.
Yeah,
So that's how my mind works. And then, the everything comes back to you the way it's meant to. And so that's why I always, and I think that is one of the ingredients as to why I'm able to make the connections that develop into relationships for so many people is I do take the time to learn about the person, nurture the relationship, and really understand who they are as a person and a business. And the referral may be on either a personal or a professional level. It's not always professional. Oftentimes, professional relationships become personal.
yeah. And who's to say that there needs to be a line all the time, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
the key is the relationship, and you know, even in our discussions, Karina, and some of the things that you've even taught me in this whole hour, like it's the abundance mentality. It is the kind of almost like it's not compulsion. That's wrong to say that. It is almost like an imperative or a mission, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
to give
Mm-hmm.
and to help others. It doesn't mean that you have to, you know, divest yourself of all worldly goods and then go to an ashram somewhere and then help the poor. But
Right.
although there's nothing wrong with that,
Mm-hmm.
but you're right. If you're one person, you could be one person away from changing your life. Then every time you connect someone with another person whom you trust, you know, sometimes you just stand back and watch the magic happen. And you just never know how it's going to end up, but it's almost never going to end up badly if it's people that you trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is the secret of the Connective. It's also the secret of, how you've built your successful business and, become the person that you are. And, like I'm just dead impressed with a lot of what you said tonight. Like simply because I see every one of my conversations with my guests as a learning opportunity for me. Selfishly, I'm like, I love it. I mean, it's like I'm curious, but I'm also selfish because I want to learn something. And I have several pages of notes already. Like, there's so much here, Karina. I learned so much about you, if nothing else. And look, I hate to say this, but we're really just about out of time. So I know, like, we keep going, but I wanted to ask you. I wanted to say first of all that if anybody wants to get in touch with Karina, check her out on LinkedIn. Karena Bell. Her name would be spelled properly in the episode title. But if you just look for Karena Bell on LinkedIn, you're going to find her. Look for Turtle Bay Payment Solutions, and you'll certainly find her there in turtlebayps.com. And we didn't even talk about your business, and I did want to give you a chance. So in your in your final words here, is there anything you want to say to our listeners? Anything you want to kind of add to what you've already said? The floor is yours.
I do. One thing that I mentor business owners as well. I volunteer at a local women's business center. And one thing I share, and when we're talking about mindset, is, and I challenge the folks that I work with, change the word failure in your vocabulary to feedback, because your perspective will change tremendously. If I give you two projects, project A is you're going to fail a lot in this project. Here you go. Project B, we're going to give you endless amounts of feedback until you succeed. Which project do you want to take? The choice is yours. And the same goes with your mindset. So many people are paralyzed by the fear of failure because failure seems final. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I failed. I'm defined by that. No. That was a moment in time. That was a brief moment in time. When you think about everything as feedback, that's all it is. Okay, that didn't go how I expected. That didn't work out well. Okay, now I need to go do something else. And what I advise people I work with is pursue feedback with a passion. As a business owner, as an employee, no matter what your role is, pursue feedback with a passion and learn from it. Learn from it, take from it, apply it, and move on. When something doesn't work out the way you expected it to, do not stay in that moment. Take from it what you need to and move on. Because when you're not moving forward, you are putting the brakes on your dreams and your goals. And they're out there waiting for you saying, why aren't you here yet? We are waiting for you. Why aren't you here yet? And when you keep your focus on your big goals, those day-to-day challenges become smaller and smaller because you know what you need to do to get through every day. You know what you need to address. You know what you need to solve because you're on your way to that big goal. And those small challenges is because, you know what? This is what I do every day. Boom, boom, boom. This is what I do. Oh, this is unexpected. Okay, I see you. I got you. Oh, okay, you're going to really come at me today with this challenge or this problem. Okay, is that the best you got? Let's go. And you make a game of it because we're all very capable in whatever role we're in. And if we can't solve it ourselves, we need to pull in other people that can help us and not do it alone. But yes, so in closing, thank you, Dan. I know sometimes we can run on forever.
Absolutely.
But the definitely were, and it didn't happen overnight. For where I am today, it was a lifetime of learning. It was a lifetime of developing and evolving. So be patient with yourself if you are on that path of development, and just be committed to your own development, that you do want to get better and you will get better. And be gentle with yourself on those days that are tough, because you know what, you might be 80% today, but tomorrow you'll come back 100%, and that's okay. That's okay. We
Giving yourself permission,
You bet.
I got to say that those last, 30, 40 seconds or so, minute, if anybody, I mentioned earlier on the Carol Dweck book, Mindset, don't buy it, don't need it. What you've just heard is basically a summary of why why the abundance mindset is critically important. And, choosing feedback over failure
Hmm.
is the core of it all. So Karena, thank you so much for saving everybody $8.99 or whatever it is to get that book. But apologies to Dr. Dweck for putting the kibosh on some of her sales. I've had so much fun in this conversation. Again, if anybody wants to find Karena, just go to LinkedIn, look for Karena Bell, go to turtlebayps.com. And also check out the Connective. We keep talking about it,
Yes.
but the Connective has a tremendous presence now on LinkedIn, and that's again Connect IVE. You'll see it. Just search for it, the Connective. And Karena is the head of the South Carolina chapter. It doesn't mean that you have to be in South Carolina necessarily to be part of her chapter, although it helps. We're not really geographic at the moment, but for offline events, when those happen, it's going to be clearly about where you're at. But Karena's chapter is incredible. She's already introducing me to fantastic people. So you listeners out there, you would do yourselves a big favor by reaching out to Karena and, saying, hey, I heard about you through the show and I want to hear more about the Connective or about your business, or just like connect, because clearly, Karena has the best interests of people in mind. And that's why I have her on the show, because she's fantastic. So Karena, thank you so much for being here. What a great conversation. And, you have to come back sometime.
Thank you so much, Dan. Anytime. I love it. Thank you. It's been an honor.
You got it. All right. Thanks for listening to the Dan Nessel Show. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. People always ask me, why do I do the show? I do it for the ratings. I do it for your validation. So do me a favor. Go over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or someplace else, wherever you're listening to podcasts, and subscribe, leave a review, rate me, and share with your friends. Anything you can do to spread the word, I deeply appreciate it. Thanks again for listening to The Dan Nessel Show.